The descent on a Vesker 5 was rougher than Dale Caron expected. His salvaged ship, the Kestrel, bucked against the planet's thin, acidic atmosphere, warning lights flashing across the cockpit's worn console. Dale's scarred hands gripped the manual controls, compensating for the ship's outdated stabilizers. 7 years of scavenging the galaxy's forgotten corners had taught him that autopilot was a luxury for newer vessels, not 30-year-old junkers held together by spare parts and stubbornness. "Come on, girl," he muttered through gritted teeth. "Just one more landing." The Kestrel's hull groaned in protest as Dale guided her toward the coordinates he'd been given. The remains of the research vessel Helios, now nothing more than a black box in a titanium casing, nestled somewhere in Vesker 5's rust-colored badlands. Simple recovery job. Good pay. No complications. Or so he'd thought. As the Kestrel settled onto the rocky plateau with a final shudder, Dale ran through his pre-exit checklist. Vesker 5's atmosphere was technically breathable, but barely. He slipped the filtered breathing mask over his face, checked his sidearm, a habit from his mercenary days, and slung his recovery kit over his shoulder. The ship's external sensors showed no immediate threats, but Dale had stopped trusting scanners long ago. The galaxy had too many things that didn't want to be detected. The airlock hissed open. He stepped out on a Vesker 5's surface, boots crunching on ferrous soil. The landscape stretched before him, a vista of red-orange rock formations under a pale green sky. Wind howled through the nearby canyons, carrying the scent of mineral oxidation and something else, something organic. Dale activated his locator, which beeped steadily as it tracked the black box's beacon. According to the readout, the crash site was just beyond the next ridge, a kilometer's walk at most. He adjusted his pack and set off, each step measured, eyes scanning the horizon. Old habits from a life he'd tried to leave behind. But it wasn't the crash site that made Dale stop in his tracks. A figure stood atop the ridge ahead, slender, female, silhouetted against the eerie green sky. As he drew closer, recognition hit him like a physical blow. The dark hair, now longer but still pulled back in that practical style. The straight posture of someone who refused to be broken by circumstance. Isla Varen. The last time he'd seen her, she'd been covered in the blood of her colleagues, barely conscious as he half-carried, half-dragged her from the burning research facility. 7 years ago. A different planet. A different life. She didn't wave or call out as he approached. She simply waited, watching him with those intense eyes, blue with flecks of gold that seemed to catch the light even in darkness. But she wasn't alone. Beside her stood a small figure, a child no more than 6 years old. Even at this distance, Dale could see the boy's features were uncannily similar to his own. The same square jaw, the same slightly asymmetrical eyes. But there was something else about the child that made Dale's skin prickle with unease. The boy's skin seemed to emit a faint luminescence, barely perceptible in the daylight, but definitely there, a soft blue glow pulsing beneath the surface. "Allah," Dale managed as he reached the top of the ridge. His voice sounded strange even to himself, dry from more than just the thin air. She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she placed her hand on the child's shoulder, guiding him forward. The boy looked up at Dale with curious eyes that were identical to his own. "You shouldn't be here," Dale continued, struggling to process what he was seeing. "This planet is." "You saved me years ago," Isla interrupted, her voice exactly as he remembered it. Calm, precise, with an undercurrent of steel. She gestured toward the child. "And left me with this." Dale stared at the boy, who stared back with equal intensity. "That's not possible," he said, though even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were a lie. The timing matched. The features were undeniable. And he and Isla had shared one desperate, adrenaline-fueled night in the cramped quarters of his escape shuttle, both of them thinking they might not live to see morning. "This is Sol," Isla said, her hand still protectively on the boy's shoulder. "Your son." As if to confirm her words, the child tilted his head in a gesture so familiar that Dale felt dizzy. It was the same movement he made himself when analyzing a new situation, a habit his military instructors had tried and failed to break. My son, Dale repeated, the words foreign on his tongue. Sol stepped forward, extending a small hand toward Dale's wrist computer. Before Dale could react, the device, which had been in low-power mode, suddenly illuminated, its screens cycling through functions without Dale touching them. The boy smiled, a look of pure delight on his face. "Hello," Sol said, his voice high-end. "Clear. Your ship is called Kestrel. It needs a new atmosphere compensator and fuel cell recalibration." Dale jerked his arm back, staring at the child in shock. "How did you?" "He didn't hack it," Isla explained, her expression grave. "He communicated with it, and that's why we need to leave. Now." As if on cue, a distant whine cut through the air, the unmistakable sound of approaching aircraft. Isla's face hardened. "They found us sooner than I expected," she said. "We need to go." Dale shook his head, trying to clear it. "Who's found you? What the hell is going on, Isla? I'm here for a salvage job, not a—" "The black box doesn't exist," she cut him off. "It was me. I planted the beacon. I needed to find you, and I knew you'd taken up salvage work after you left the mercenary life." The realization hit Dale like a physical blow. "You set me up. I needed to find you," she repeated, her voice softening slightly. "For him. For Sol. And because we're running out of time." The aircraft's sound grew louder. Isla grabbed Sol's hand, then reached for Dale's arm with surprising strength. "Make your choice, Dale. Stay and meet the Syndicate recovery team that's coming for your son, or get us off this rock. Either way, they've been tracking us for months, and they won't stop until they have him." The Syndicate? Dale's blood ran cold. His former employers. The ones who'd ordered the raid on Isla's research facility 7 years ago. The raid he'd been part of until he'd seen what they were really doing and turned against his own team. "They're still after you?" "Not me," Isla said grimly. "Him." She nodded towards Sol, who was now looking anxiously at the sky. "What he carries inside him." Dale didn't need to hear more. The mention of the Syndicate was enough. He'd sworn never to let them hurt anyone else after what he'd witnessed. He activated his comm unit. "Kestrel, initiate emergency launch protocol. Authorization Coron Delta 7. As the ship's engines roared to life in the distance, Dale made a decision that would change everything. He scooped up Sol, noting with surprise how light the boy was, and nodded to Isla. "Stay close. We got about 3 minutes before those ships are on top of us." Together they ran toward the waiting Kestrel as the first Syndicate craft broke through the clouds above them. The Kestrel's engines were already at full burn when Dale, Isla, and Sol tumbled through the airlock. Dale slammed his palm against the emergency seal button and sprinted for the cockpit, shouting over his shoulder, "Strap in wherever you can find a harness." He threw himself into the pilot's seat, hands flying over the controls. The ship's sensors showed 3, no, for pursuit craft closing fast, their signatures matching Syndicate interceptors. Military grade. Armed. "Damn it," Dale muttered, punching in the launch sequence. The Kestrel shuddered as her landing gear retracted, thrusters struggling against Vesker 5's gravity. A warning klaxon sounded. "Weapons lock." Dale yanked the controls hard, sending the ship into a spiraling climb just as energy weapons scorched the ground where they'd been moments before. The inertial dampeners couldn't keep up with the maneuver. He heard Isla cry out from somewhere behind him as the G-forces hit. "Sorry," he called back, not taking his eyes from the controls. "Old ship, old dampeners." The Kestrel broke atmosphere with the Syndicate ships in close pursuit. Dale pushed the engines beyond safety limits, heading for the dense asteroid field that ringed Vesker 5's northern hemisphere. It was a desperate move, but the Kestrel was smaller, more maneuverable than her pursuers. If he could just reach the field, a small voice beside him made him jump. "The third ship has a targeting malfunction. You should exploit it." Sol had somehow unbuckled himself and made his way to the cockpit. The boy's eyes were fixed on the tactical display, where 4 red dots trailed their green one. What was more unsettling was that the child's skin was now definitely glowing, pulses of blue light running just beneath the surface like electronic circuits. "Sol, you need to be strapped in," Dale snapped, fear making his voice harsh. The boy didn't flinch. Instead, he pointed at the display. There, that one. Its targeting system uses an older algorithm. I can feel it. Before Dale could respond, the ship rocked violently as a glancing hit from an energy weapon struck their port side. Warning lights flashed across the console. Shields at 62%. The ship's computer announced in its maddeningly calm voice. "Get back to your mother," Dale shouted. But Sol was already reaching toward the tactical display, his small fingers hovering just above the screen. The blue glow beneath his skin intensified, concentrating in his fingertips. The third Syndicate ship, the one Sol had pointed out, suddenly veered off course, its weapons systems powering down. It drifted into the path of the fourth ship, causing the latter to execute an emergency avoidance maneuver. Dale stared at the child in disbelief. "Did you just—" "He can interface with technology," Isla said, appearing in the cockpit doorway, her face pale but composed. "Especially systems with certain vulnerabilities. It's part of what makes him so valuable to them." Another hit rocked the ship. Shields at 45%, the computer reported. Dale gritted his teeth and pushed the Kestrel harder, the asteroid field now visible through the view screen. "Both of you strap in. Now, this is going to get rough." As Isla pulled Sol back toward the passenger compartment, Dale focused on the impossible task ahead, outrunning Syndicate interceptors through an asteroid field in a salvage ship that was already falling apart. Just another day in the life he tried to leave behind. The next 20 minutes were a blur of desperate maneuvers, near misses, and the constant wail of the Kestrel's warning systems. Dale flew on instinct, using the dense field of space rocks as both shield and weapon, luring the Syndicate ships into narrower and narrower passages until one by one, they either broke off pursuit or met their end against the implacable asteroids. When the last red dot disappeared from his tactical display, Dale allowed himself to breathe again. He set the Kestrel on a course through the remainder of the field, toward the dark side of Vesker 5's larger moon. Only then did he engage the autopilot and stumble back to the passenger compartment, exhaustion and adrenaline making his legs unsteady. Isla had strapped herself and Sol into the two available jump seats. She'd found emergency oxygen masks for both of them, unnecessary now that they were in space, but she couldn't have known that during the chaos of takeoff. The sight stirred something in Dale's chest. He'd forgotten how capable she was, how quick to adapt. Sol's glow had dimmed to almost nothing, and the boy looked drained, his head resting against his mother's shoulder. His eyes, however, remained alert, tracking Dale's every movement. "I think we're clear for now," Dale said, collapsing into the third jump seat across from them. "But they'll have called for backup. We need to get out of this system." He fixed Isla with a hard stare. "And you need to tell me what the hell is going on." Isla's hand moved to stroke Sol's hair, a gesture so tender it seemed at odds with the tension in her body. "It's a long story." "Make it short," Dale countered. "You owe me that much." She nodded slowly. "After you rescued me from the facility on Epsilon Prime, after you left, I discovered I was pregnant." Her eyes flicked briefly to Sol, who was watching the exchange with unervingly adult focus. "I was the only survivor of my research team, the only one who knew what we'd been working on for the Syndicate." "Which was what exactly?" Dale asked, though part of him already knew, had known since the moment he'd seen Sol's glowing skin. "Project Chorus," Isla replied, confirming his suspicion. "A program to create a living interface between biological and technological systems. The Syndicate told us it was for medical applications, direct neural control of prosthetics, curing paralysis, enhancing human potential." Dale's mouth twisted bitterly. "But that wasn't what they wanted it for." "No." Isla's voice hardened. "They wanted weapons. They wanted soldiers who could disable enemy systems with a thought, control drones with their minds, infiltrate security networks by simply touching a terminal. And when you found out, you tried to shut it down," Dale guessed. "We all did. My entire team. But someone informed the Syndicate. They sent a strike team to eliminate us and take our research." Her eyes met Dale's. "Your team." Dale flinched at the reminder of his former life, of the things he'd done in the Syndicate's name before that fateful day. "I didn't know what the mission was until we were inside. Until I saw what they were doing to your colleagues. I know, Isla said quietly. That's why you turned on them. Why you saved me. She looked down at Sol. But by then, I had already done something they still don't know about. Something desperate. Sol, who had been silent throughout the exchange, spoke up. She put the data inside herself. Dale's eyes widened. What? Isla nodded. Project Chorus was about integration, merging biological systems with technological ones. I used our prototype to encode the key research data into my own cellular structure. Not just storing it, integrating it. The Syndicate thought all our work was destroyed in the attack. They never suspected that I had become the living repository of everything they wanted. But if you encoded it into your cells, Dale's gaze shifted to Sol, understanding dawning. Yes, Isla confirmed. When I became pregnant, the modified DNA transferred to him. But something unexpected happened. The encoding wasn't just passive in Sol. It became active, evolved. He was born with the ability to interface directly with technology. He doesn't just carry the data. He is the living embodiment of what Project Chorus was trying to achieve. Sol had begun to fidget in his seat, his attention drawn to the ship's systems humming around them. The ship says it's worried about its power coupling, he announced suddenly. It's vibrating at the wrong frequency. See, Isla said softly. He can hear them, feel them, communicate with them. And as he grows, his abilities are getting stronger. Dale ran a hand over his face, trying to process what he was hearing. So, the Syndicate, they found out about him. About 2 years ago. We've been hiding on frontier worlds, keeping to ourselves. But Sol's abilities started to manifest more visibly. She gestured to the boy's skin. The bioluminescence was the first sign. Then he started talking to devices, house systems, public terminals. Someone noticed, reported it. We've been running ever since. What do they want with him? Dale asked, though he already knew the answer. Everything, Isla replied grimly. They want to study him, replicate what happened, create more like him, but under their control. And if they can't do that, she didn't finish the sentence, but she didn't need to. If they couldn't control Sol, they would eliminate him, just like they'd tried to eliminate her team. Dale felt a surge of protective instinct, so powerful it surprised him. This child, his child, represented everything the Syndicate had sought to create and exploit. And Isla had been bearing this burden alone for 7 years. Because he'd left. Because after getting her to safety, he'd disappeared, convinced that distance was the only gift he could offer her. There's a place, he said finally. An old relay station north of here. It dates back to before the Interstellar War, uses biotechnology that might be compatible with what's inside Sol. If we can get there, we might be able to erase your biological tracking markers, the ones the Syndicate is using to find you. Hope flickered in Isla's eyes. Is it far? About 3 days' journey at our current speed. But we'll need to make most of it on the ground. The Syndicate will have blockades in orbit by now. Sol, who had been quiet during this exchange, suddenly stiffened. His eyes widened, and the blue glow beneath his skin pulsed brightly. What is it? Isla asked, instantly alert. A signal, the boy whispered. Someone's looking for us. Someone. His face scrunched in concentration. Not Syndicate. Different. Dale quickly moved back to the cockpit, checking the sensors. Nothing appeared on the regular scanners, but when he switched to the deep band frequency detector, a modification he'd added for locating buried salvage, he saw it. A faint, rhythmic signal emanating from the surface of Vesker 5 near the northern polar region. He's right, Dale called back to Isla. There's something down there. Something broadcasting on a very unusual frequency. Isla appeared in the doorway, Sol at her side. Is it a trap? Dale studied the signal pattern. I don't think so. It's too old. The modulation looks pre-war, and it's coming from roughly the same area as the relay station I mentioned. We should go there, Sol said with sudden certainty. It's calling to me. Dale and Isla exchanged a glance. There is no good choice here, only the least dangerous one. Stay in space, and the Syndicate would eventually find them. Head for a populated world, and they risked exposing Sol to countless witnesses who might report them. The relay station it is, Dale decided. We'll approach from an outside, try to slip past any orbital sensors they've set up. As he plotted their descent vector, Dale was acutely aware of Sol watching him with those unervingly familiar eyes. Eyes that had seen too much for a 6-year-old. Eyes that held the inherited trauma of both his parents, along with something else, something both human and not. "Can I help?" the boy asked quietly. Dale hesitated, then gestured to the co-pilot's seat. "Strap in and don't touch anything without asking first." As Sol carefully buckled himself in, his expression serious and focused, Dale felt a strange mix of fear and pride. Whatever happened next, whatever challenges lay ahead on Vesker 5's surface, one thing was certain. Life, as he'd known it, was over. He was no longer just a salvager, no longer just an ex-mercenary with a past he was running from. He was a father, and for the first time in 7 years, he had something worth fighting for. The Kestrel descended toward Vesker 5's northern region under the cover of the planet's long night. Dale kept the ship's power signature as low as possible, running silent and dark to avoid detection by any syndicate vessels that might be patrolling the area. The landing was rougher than he would have liked. Manual controls with minimal power to the stabilizers meant. They bounced twice before settling on the frozen tundra. "Everyone okay?" Dale called out as he powered down the remaining systems. In the co-pilot's seat, Sol nodded, his eyes wide but unafraid. The boy had remained silent throughout the descent, watching Dale's every move with intense fascination. Isla appeared in the doorway. Already dressed in the cold weather gear Dale had scrounged from the Kestrel's emergency supplies. "We're fine. How far are we from the relay station?" Dale checked the coordinates. "About 20 kilometers. Too far to walk in this climate, but I've got a ground transport in the cargo hold. It's not much, but it'll get us there." "And the signal?" Isla asked, glancing at Sol, who had closed his eyes, head tilted as if listening to something only he could hear. "Still broadcasting. Stronger now that we're closer." Dale began pulling on his own thermal gear. "We should move quickly. The Kestrel's hull will mask our life signs for a while, but once we're out in the open..." He didn't need to finish the thought. They'd be exposed, trackable by the very biological markers the relay station might help them erase. The ground transport, essentially a 6-wheeled, enclosed ATV that Dale had salvaged from a military surplus yard, rumbled across the tundra's icy surface. Inside the cramped cabin, Sol sat between Dale and Isla, occasionally pointing out adjustments to their course based on the signal only he could fully perceive. "It's this way," he would say, and Dale would correct their heading accordingly, trusting the boys' inexplicable connection to whatever was calling them. The landscape gradually changed as they traveled north. The barren tundra gave way to something more unsettling. Fields of twisted metal and biological matter, fused together in grotesque formations. In some places, what looked like mechanical tendrils emerged from the ground, reaching skyward like grasping fingers. In others, pools of luminescent fluid pulsed with a rhythm that seemed almost heartbeat-like. "What is this place?" Dale murmured, slowing the transport to navigate around a particularly large formation of metal and what appeared to be ossified tissue. Project Chorus wasn't limited to one facility, Isla explained, her voice tight. The Syndicate had research stations all over the frontier worlds, places where they could experiment without oversight. She gestured to the alien landscape outside. This is what happens when those experiments are abandoned. When biological and technological systems are left to evolve on their own. Sol pressed his face to the window, transfixed by the sights. "They're sleeping," he whispered. "Not dead, just sleeping." A chill ran down Dale's spine that had nothing to do with Vesker 5's frigid temperature. He accelerated, eager to leave this bizarre graveyard behind them. As they drove, memories began to surface, unwelcome flashbacks to his time with the Syndicate, the missions he'd carried out without questioning, the researchers and subjects he'd helped eliminate, all in the name of security and progress. How many other Islas had there been? How many facilities had he raided? How many lives had he ended before finally seeing the truth on Epsilon Prime? "You're thinking about it again," Isla said suddenly, breaking the silence. I can tell by your expression. Dale's hands tightened on the transport's controls. Hard not to, driving through this. He nodded toward the window. How many of these projects did I help them protect? How many people died because I was following orders? You can't change the past, Isla replied, her voice softening slightly. Believe me, I've tried. My team and I, we thought we were doing something revolutionary, something that would help people. We didn't realize what the syndicate really wanted until it was too late. But you try to stop it, Dale countered. I just followed orders. Until that day. And then you didn't, Isla reminded him. You made a choice. You saved me. And then I left you, Dale said, the words bitter in his mouth. I dropped you at that medical outpost and disappeared. I didn't even check if you survived. Isla was quiet for a long moment. Why? She finally asked. Why did you leave? Dale stared out at the twisted landscape, searching for an answer that didn't sound like an excuse. I thought I was protecting you, he said at last. The syndicate was hunting me. Anyone connected to me would be in danger. And I didn't know how to be anything other than what I was. A soldier. A killer. You could have been more, Isla said quietly. Before Dale could respond, Sol suddenly sat up straight, pointing ahead. There. The signal is coming from there. Through the transport's windshield, Dale could make out a structure in the distance. A building of some kind, its architecture unlike anything he'd seen before. It seemed to grow out of the landscape, curves and angles blending with the surrounding terrain in a way that made it difficult to tell where the natural world ended and the constructed one began. The relay station, Dale confirmed, checking his navigation system. But it looks different than I remember. As they drew closer, the reason became clear. The station, once a standard pre-war communications hub, had been partially absorbed by the same biomechanical growth that pervaded the region. Tendrils of metal and tissue wrapped around its exterior, pulsing with that same rhythmic light they'd seen in the fields. It's alive, Sol whispered, his own skin beginning to glow in response to the station's emissions. It wants to talk to us. Dale parked the transport a safe distance from the structure, instinct telling him not to get too close until they knew more about what they were facing. I don't like this, he said, checking his sidearm. That building wasn't integrated like this the last time I was here. When was that? Isla asked, helping Sol into an additional layer of thermal clothing. 3 years ago. Salvage run. Dale frowned at the memory. The place was abandoned, but intact. Standard relay technology with some biological components, living circuits, neural interfaces for the operators. But nothing like this. Sol had finished putting on his gloves and was now straining toward the door, eager to exit the transport. It knows I'm here, he said urgently. It's waiting. Dale and Isla exchanged a worried glance. We should approach carefully, Isla suggested. If it's evolved from the original relay technology, there's no telling what it might be capable of. Dale nodded, trying to ignore the unease building in his gut. Stay behind me, both of you. And Sol. He turned to the boy, who was practically vibrating with anticipation. Don't touch anything. Don't try to connect with anything. Not until we know it's safe. They exited the transport into Vesker 5's biting cold. Even through the thermal gear, Dale could feel the chill trying to penetrate to his bones. The structure loomed before them, its surface undulating slightly, as if breathing. The signal Sol had been tracking was now audible even to Dale and Isla, a low, pulsing hum that seemed to bypass the ears and resonate directly in the chest. As they approached what had once been the station's entrance, the surface parted, creating an opening like a dilating iris. Warm, amber light spilled out, along with air that smelled strangely sweet and organic. It's inviting us in, Sol said, his voice filled with wonder. Or it's trying to lure us in, Dale countered, drawing his weapon. Stay close. The interior of the relay station was even more transformed than the exterior. What had once been sterile corridors and communication terminals was now a labyrinth of living tissue and technology fused into something entirely new. The walls pulsed with light that followed them as they moved deeper into the structure, and underfoot, the floor felt slightly yielding, like walking on dense moss. This is incredible, Isla murmured, her scientific curiosity temporarily overriding her caution. The integration is complete. Perfect symbiosis between technological and biological systems. Just like me, Sol said, reaching out to touch a nearby wall. Before Dale could stop him, the boy's fingers made contact with the pulsing surface. Immediately, the entire structure seemed to shudder. The lights brightened, and the humming sound intensified. Sol's eyes widened, his skin glowing brightly enough to be seen clearly through his clothing. "Sol!" Isla cried, reaching for him, but the boy didn't appear to be in distress. Instead, his face reflected pure amazement. "It's talking to me," he whispered. "It's been waiting for someone like me. For so long." Dale moved to pull Sol away from the wall, but stopped when he noticed something forming on the surface where the boy's hand rested, a pattern of light that shifted and changed, eventually resolving into recognizable symbols. "Language. What is it saying?" Dale asked, his weapon still ready, but his curiosity piqued. Sol's brow furrowed in concentration. "It's telling me its history. It was a relay station, like you said. But during the war, it was abandoned. Left alone. The biological components, the living circuits, didn't die. They evolved, grew, integrated with the technology around them." He paused, his eyes moving rapidly as if reading an invisible text. "It's been alone for decades. Waiting for a bridge. A bridge," Isla repeated. Sol nodded, still connected to the living wall. "Between worlds. Between the biological and the technological. Between what was and what could be." His eyes met Dale's. "It says I'm the first. The seed of something new." Before Dale could process this, a different sound cut through the station's ambient hum. The unmistakable whine of aircraft engines. "Close." "Syndicate," Dale growled, pulling Sol away from the wall. "They must have tracked us from orbit." Isla's face paled. "We need to complete the procedure, the biological marker erasure. It's our only chance." "Do you even know how?" Dale demanded. "This place isn't exactly standard equipment anymore." Sol, surprisingly calm despite the looming threat, pointed deeper into the structure. "This way. It will help us. It hates them too." "Them?" Dale questioned, but he was already following, one hand on Sol's shoulder, the other gripping his weapon. "The ones who abandoned it," Sol explained as they hurried down a corridor that seemed to reshape itself ahead of them, guiding their path. "The ones who treat living things like tools." They emerged into what had once been the station's central control room. Now it was a cathedral-like space, dominated by a pulsing core of light and living tissue at its center. Tendrils of the same material stretched from the core to various points around the room, forming a web of connections that reminded Dale unsettlingly of a nervous system. Sol approached the core without hesitation. "This is it. The heart. It can remove the markers, like you said." Outside, the sound of the Syndicate aircraft grew louder. They were landing. "How does it work?" Isla asked urgently, scanning the room for anything resembling a control interface. In response, part of the core extended toward them, forming a sort of platform at chest height. The surface of the platform rippled, then formed 3 distinct depressions, each roughly hand-shaped. "It needs a biological connection," Sol explained, already placing his small hand into the smallest depression. "From all of us." Isla hesitated only briefly before placing her hand in the second depression. Both she and Sol gasped as the living material flowed around their fingers, securing them in place. Their skin began to glow with the same light that pulsed through the station, veins and arteries illuminated from within. Dale stared at the third depression, doubt and fear warring within him. What exactly is this going to do? "Erase the markers," Sol said, his voice strained. "But it needs energy, life force. It will drain us," Isla added, her face tense with pain or concentration. Dale couldn't tell which. "Significantly, but it's the only way to remove the tracking signature from our cells." Dale heard the sound of boots on metal, Syndicate forces entering the station. They had minutes, maybe less. "I'll do it," he said, holstering his weapon and stepping forward. How much will it take? Will you survive? Isla's eyes met his, filled with determination and something else, something that made his chest ache. I don't know, but Sol has to survive. He's too important. No. Dale shook his head. You're both getting out of this. He placed his hand in the third depression, bracing himself for whatever came next. The sensation was immediate and overwhelming, like every cell in his body was being pulled toward his hand, drawn into the living core before him. Pain lanced through him, a burning that started in his fingertips and raced up his arm to his chest. He heard Isla cry out beside him, saw Sol's small body tense. Too much, Dale gasped. It's taking too much. Through the haze of pain, he saw tears streaming down Sol's face, the first time he'd seen the boy cry. But there was something different about these tears. They glowed with the same blue light that pulsed beneath his skin, falling onto the platform where his hand was connected. The moment the first tear hit the living tissue, everything changed. The painful pulling sensation stopped, replaced by a surge of energy flowing through all three of them. The core pulsed brighter, the light racing through the web of connections throughout the room, then spreading outward into the entire structure. What's happening? Dale managed to ask, his voice strained. Sol's eyes were wide with wonder. It's using our connection, our family bond. It's stronger than it expected, more efficient. The living tissue released their hands, receding back into the core, which now spun with a kaleidoscope of colors, blues, greens, and golds swirling together. Did it work? Isla asked, examining her hand where the skin still glowed faintly. Before Sol could answer, the station shuddered. From somewhere nearby came the sound of weapons fire and shouting. They're here, Dale said, drawing his sidearm again. We need to move. Sol placed his hand on the core one last time. It says the procedure is complete. Our cellular markers have been reconfigured. The syndicate can't track us the same way anymore. He paused, listening to something only he could hear. And it's giving us a gift. Time. As if responding to his words, the corridors they had walked through began to seal themselves, living walls growing together. The station was changing its internal architecture, creating a maze that would slow their pursuers. There's another way out, Sol said confidently, pointing to what looked like a solid wall. Through there, it will lead us to the surface, away from where they landed. Dale didn't question the boy. He'd seen enough to trust Sol's connection with the station. Lead the way. The wall parted as they approached, revealing a narrow tunnel that sloped upward. They moved quickly, Dale taking the rear position to guard against pursuit. The sounds of the syndicate forces grew more distant as the station continued to reconfigure itself around them, protecting them, buying them time. After what felt like hours of climbing, but was probably only minutes, they emerged onto Vesker 5's surface half a kilometer from where they'd entered. The night sky above them was filled with stars, and in the distance, they could see the lights of multiple syndicate vessels surrounding the station. We can't go back for the transport, Dale said grimly. We need to find another way off this rock. The station says there's a place we can go, Sol offered. A living forest to the east. It will hide us while we plan our next move. Dale and Isla exchanged a glance, both recognizing the absurdity of their situation, trusting the directions of a 6-year-old boy communing with a semi-sentient building. But what choice did they have? The living forest it is, Dale decided, checking the position of Vesker 5's moons to orient himself. Stay close and move quietly. We've got a long walk ahead of us. As they made their way across the frozen landscape, Dale couldn't help but notice how naturally Sol had taken his hand, the small fingers gripping his with complete trust. On the boy's other side, Isla walked with the determined stride of someone who had been running for too long. The three of them, moving as one, a family forged in the strangest of circumstances. Dale wasn't sure what awaited them in the living forest, or how they would eventually escape Vesker 5. But for the first time in years, he wasn't running from something. He was running towards something, something worth protecting. The journey to the living forest took most of the night. They moved cautiously, keeping to the shadows, freezing in place whenever syndicate search vessels passed overhead. Sol led them unerringly, occasionally pausing to place his hand on the ground, as if communicating with Vesker, 5 itself. The planet remembers, he explained when Dale questioned him. It remembers everything that grows on it. The forest is calling to me. Dawn was breaking on the horizon when they finally reached the edge of what Sol had called a forest. From a distance, it looked like nothing more than a large, irregularly shaped hill covered in an iridescent moss. But as they drew closer, Dale realized the hill was moving ever so slightly, expanding and contracting like the chest of a sleeping giant. "What is this place?" he whispered, instinctively keeping his voice low. "A symbiotic mega-organism," Isla replied, her scientific curiosity evident despite their exhaustion. "Part fungal, part plant, part something else. I've read theories about such entities, but I've never seen one." Sol approached the pulsing surface of the forest without fear. It's been growing for centuries. It makes spaces inside itself, chambers for creatures to live in. It protects them, and they bring it nutrients from outside. As if responding to his words, a section of the forest's surface parted, revealing an opening just large enough for them to enter. Warm, humid air wafted out, carrying scents of rich soil and something sweetly floral. "It's inviting us in," Sol said, turning to his parents with a smile that seemed too wise for his years. Dale hesitated, looking to Isla. After a moment, she nodded. "We don't have many options," she said quietly. And if Sol trusts it, they entered the living forest, stepping into a world unlike anything Dale had ever experienced. Inside, the structure opened into a vast chamber illuminated by clusters of bioluminescent pods hanging from the ceiling like chandeliers. The floor was covered in a soft, moss-like growth that yielded gently beneath their feet. Tendrils of various thicknesses grew along the walls, pulsing slowly with what looked like fluid. "Its circulatory system," Isla murmured, examining one of the larger tendrils, "moving nutrients and water throughout the structure." Sol wandered deeper into the chamber, his hand trailing along the living wall. "It's making a place for us," he called back. "Somewhere we can rest." Sure enough, as they followed him, the forest opened into a smaller chamber where the floor had formed 3 depressions, each lined with soft, downy fibers that resembled bedding. A cluster of fruit-like pods hung from the ceiling at easy-reaching height. "Are those safe to eat?" Dale asked skeptically. Sol reached up and plucked one, his skin momentarily glowing where it made contact with the pod. "Yes," he said confidently. "The forest makes them for its guests. They're full of nutrients." Isla took the pod from him, examining it carefully before breaking it open to reveal a pulpy interior studded with small, glistening seeds. She sniffed it, then took a tentative taste. "It's sweet," she reported, "almost like a cross between a pear and honey." Their hunger overcoming caution, they each ate several of the pods before collapsing into the nest-like depressions the forest had created for them. The living structure seemed to sense their need for privacy, growing a translucent membrane across the entrance to their chamber that allowed light through but obscured the view from outside. Dale lay in his organic bed, staring up at the gently pulsing ceiling, acutely aware of Sol and Isla just a few feet away. The enormity of what had happened in the past 24 hours crashed over him. He had a son with incredible abilities that made him both a miracle and a target. And Isla, the woman he'd saved and abandoned, was back in his life, bringing with her all the regret and unresolved feelings he'd tried to outrun for 7 years. "You should sleep," Isla's voice broke through his thoughts. He turned his head to see her watching him, her expression unreadable in the dim, blue-green light. "I'll keep watch," he replied automatically. "The forest will warn us if anyone approaches," she said. Sol connected with it. "It's protecting us." Dale wasn't sure how to respond to that. The idea of trusting their safety to a giant plant-fungus hybrid wasn't exactly comforting. But then again, nothing about their situation was normal. "How long have you been running?" he asked instead. Isla sighed, pushing herself up to sit cross-legged in her nest. "Since Sol was 4. That's when his abilities became impossible to hide. Before that, We managed to stay under the radar on a small agricultural colony. I worked as a field biologist, nothing that would attract attention. And after, planet to planet, station to station, never staying anywhere long enough to form connections. Her voice held a weariness that went beyond physical exhaustion, always watching for signs that they'd found us. Dale felt the familiar weight of guilt settling in his chest. I should have been there. Yes, Isla agreed, her tone matter-of-fact rather than accusatory. You should have, but you weren't, and we survived. Her candor stung, but Dale couldn't argue with it. What happens now? He asked after a moment. Isla glanced at Sol, who had fallen into an exhausted sleep, his chest rising and falling steadily. In sleep, the glow beneath his skin had dimmed to almost nothing, making him look like any ordinary 6-year-old boy. I don't know, she admitted. For so long, all I've thought about is keeping him safe, staying one step ahead of the syndicate. I never allowed myself to think about after. There has to be somewhere, Dale insisted. Somewhere beyond the syndicate's reach. Isla gave a humorless laugh. Is there? They have operatives in every major system. Resources we can only imagine. And what they want. She nodded towards Sol. What they want is something they'll never stop hunting for. Dale couldn't argue with her assessment. The syndicate's reach was vast, their determination legendary. They didn't give up. Ever. Then we make them stop, he said, the words emerging before he'd fully formed the thought. We find a way to make it not worth their while to keep hunting. How? By destroying the data? It's part of him now, Dale. It's in his DNA. Then we expose them, Dale countered. Make public what they were trying to do with Project Chorus. Hit them where it hurts, their contracts, their political backing. Isla shook her head. We'd never get close enough to their systems. And even if we did, they'd just deny everything, paint us as terrorists or paranoid conspiracists. They lapsed into silence, the impossibility of their situation hanging between them. After a while, Dale's exhaustion won out, and he drifted into a restless sleep filled with dreams of running, of syndicate ships firing on the Kestrel, of Sol's small hands slipping from his grasp. He woke to find the chamber empty, except for himself. Panic surged through him as he scrambled to his feet, calling out, Isla, Sol. The membrane across the entrance parted, and Sol poked his head through. We're out here, he said. Mom's exploring. The forest is showing us things. Relief flooded through Dale, followed immediately by embarrassment at his reaction. He followed Sol out of their sleeping chamber into a network of tunnels and larger cavities, all pulsing with the same gentle bioluminescence. They found Isla in a spacious chamber where several of the forest tendrils had shaped themselves into seats and tables. This place is remarkable, she said as they joined her. It's been sheltering indigenous life forms for centuries. But we're the first humans it's encountered. How do you know that? Dale asked, accepting another fruit pod that Sol offered him. It showed me, Isla replied simply. Through Sol, he's able to act as a sort of translator between us and the forest consciousness. Dale looked at his son with a mixture of wonder and concern. Is that safe for him? It doesn't hurt, Sol assured him, taking a bite of his own pod. It's like listening to a very slow story. The forest thinks differently than we do. Its thoughts take days to form. They spent the next few hours exploring their living sanctuary, discovering chambers with fresh water collected from the atmosphere, others where various edible growths were cultivated. The forest, it seemed, was a self-contained ecosystem designed to sustain life within its boundaries. As the day wore on, Dale found himself alone with Sol for the first time. Isla had discovered a chamber with properties she wanted to study further, leaving father and son sitting together on a ridge overlooking a small interior valley where gleaming pools collected condensation from the air. Dale studied his son's profile, still startled by how clearly he could see himself in the boy's features. So, he began awkwardly, you can talk to machines. And plants. That's quite a skill set. Sol smiled, a gesture that transformed his serious face into something heartbreakingly childlike. Not all machines, and not exactly talking. It's more like feeling what they feel, understanding what they need. He looked down at his hands, with a faint blue glow pulsed beneath the skin. Sometimes I can help them. Sometimes they help me. And the forest? It's helping us. Sol nodded. It's curious about us. Especially you. Me? Dale raised an eyebrow. Why me? Because you're different than you used to be, Sol replied, turning those unervingly perceptive eyes on him. The forest can sense it. You used to be harder, colder. Now there's warmth. Dale wasn't sure how to respond to that assessment. I'm not a good person, Sol, he said finally. I've done things, terrible things, that I can't take back. Mom says everyone has a past, Sol said thoughtfully. She says what matters is what we do with our future. Your mom is a smart woman. She missed you, Sol said matter-of-factly. She never said it, but I could tell. Sometimes she would look at pictures of you from the news feeds about the missions you were on. She thought I didn't know, but I did. Dale felt something tighten in his chest. I missed her too, he admitted. I just didn't know I was missing you as well. But you came back, Sol said, and there was something in his voice, a simple certainty that made Dale's throat constrict. That's all that matters. You chose to be here. Before Dale could respond, a tremor ran through the living forest around them. Sol stiffened, his skin suddenly glowing brightly. What is it? Dale asked, instantly alert. Someone's coming, Sol whispered. The forest feels them. They're cutting into it, hurting it. Dale was on his feet immediately, pulling Sol up with him. Where's your mother? This way, Sol said, leading him rapidly through a series of tunnels. They found Isla already running toward them, her face tense with alarm. Syndicate? She asked. Dale nodded grimly. Must be. How did they find us so quickly? The biological markers are gone, but they still have other ways to track, Isla said, her scientific mind racing ahead. Heat signatures, atmospheric disturbances from our entry. We need to move deeper, Sol interrupted, his small face set with determination. The forest will protect us, but we have to go to its heart. Once again, they found themselves following the boy as he navigated the living labyrinth with unerring confidence. Behind them, they could hear the distant sounds of the forest being breached, the hiss of cutting tools, the thud of boots, the sharp commands of syndicate operatives. Sol led them through increasingly narrow passages, some so tight that Dale and Isla had to squeeze through sideways. The glow that illuminated their path grew dimmer, until they were moving almost in darkness, guided only by Sol's luminescent skin and the faint phosphorescence of the walls. Finally, they emerged into a vast chamber unlike any they'd seen before. At its center stood what could only be described as the forest's heart, a massive, pulsating structure that branched upward and outward like a tree, its branches connecting to the ceiling and walls of the chamber in a complex network of living tendrils. This is it, Sol whispered reverently. The first seed, the beginning. The heart pulsed with a deep, reddish light that synchronized with Sol's own glow. As they watched, part of the structure extended toward them, forming a platform similar to what they'd seen in the relay station. It wants to help us, Sol said. It can hide us completely, make us part of itself for a while. Dale exchanged a worried glance with Isla. What does that mean? Exactly. Before Sol could answer, a section of wall behind them burst inward. 3 syndicate operatives in full tactical gear poured through the breach, weapons raised. Target acquired, one of them shouted. Subject Alpha located. Dale reacted instinctively, pushing Sol behind him and drawing his sidearm in one fluid motion. He managed to get off 2 shots, taking down one operative before the others returned fire, forcing him and Isla to dive for cover behind a raised section of a chamber floor. We can't let them take him, Isla hissed, her eyes wild with protective fury. Dale nodded grimly. Stay with him. I'll draw their fire. But Sol had other ideas. Before either parent could stop him, he darted away from their protection, running straight toward the forest's heart. The moment his hands touched the pulsing central structure, a wave of energy exploded outward. The pursuing operatives were thrown back against the walls of the chamber, their weapons torn from their hands by an invisible force. The entire forest shuddered. From every surface, tendrils began to emerge, wrapping around the intruders, immobilizing them. The operatives struggled and shouted, but the living bonds only tightened in response. Soul stood at the heart, his entire body now glowing so brightly that Dale could barely look at him directly. "The forest understands now," the boy said, his voice strangely amplified. "It knows what they want, what they've done to other living things." More tendrils emerged from the walls, thicker and more purposeful than before. They wrapped around Dale and Isla, not restraining them, but protecting them, forming a living barrier between them and the captured operatives. "Soul," Isla called, her voice tight with fear. "Soul, what's happening?" The boy turned to them, his eyes glowing the same reddish hue as the forest's heart. "It's offering us a choice," he said. "We can become part of it. Not forever, but for long enough. Long enough for them to give up searching. Long enough to be safe. Become part of it," Dale repeated. "You mean, live here?" Soul nodded. "Inside. Protected. Connected." He pressed his hand deeper into the heart's surface. "It would change us a little. Help us adapt. But we be together. And when it's safe, when they've stopped looking, we could leave." Dale looked at Isla, seeing his own uncertainty reflected in her face. To trust their lives to this alien organism, to essentially hibernate within it while the Syndicate's hunt died down. It was an impossible choice. And yet, what alternatives did they have? What about them? Dale nodded toward the captured operatives, who had fallen silent, watching the exchange with a mixture of fear and calculating assessment. "The forest will keep them until we're safe," Soul replied. "Then release them with no memory of finding us." One of the operatives suddenly laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed in the chamber. "You think this is over?" he called out. "The Syndicate never stops hunting what belongs to it. You can hide, but eventually we'll find you. We always do." "Maybe," Dale acknowledged, stepping closer to the man. "But not today. And maybe by the time you do find us again, we'll have found a way to end this chase for good." He turned back to Soul and Isla, making his decision. "I'm with you," he said simply. "Whatever you choose, I'm with you this time. All the way." Isla reached out, taking his hand in hers. "Together, then?" Dale nodded, his throat too tight for words. They approached the heart of the forest, where Soul waited for them, his small face solemn, yet somehow peaceful. As a family, they placed their hands on the pulsing surface, feeling the warm, living tissue yield beneath their touch. The forest responded immediately. Tendrils of living matter emerged, wrapping around their arms, their legs, their bodies, not constricting, but embracing. Dale felt a moment of panic as the material began to envelop him fully, but then Soul's voice came to him, somehow inside his mind rather than through his ears. "Don't be afraid," his son said. "It's not an ending. It's just a pause." The last thing Dale saw before the living forest completed its embrace was Isla's face, her eyes locked with his, fear giving way to something else, something that looked remarkably like hope. And then darkness, but not emptiness. In the darkness, he felt them, Isla and Soul, their consciousnesses somehow connected to his through the forest's living network. Not as separate beings, but as parts of a whole, a family. The sensation was unlike anything Dale had experienced before, a completeness, a belonging that transcended physical proximity. He couldn't say how long they remained that way, suspended in the heart of the living forest. Time had little meaning in that state, but eventually, gradually, awareness of his individual self returned. The embracing tendrils receded, allowing Dale to open his eyes to a changed world. The chamber looked as it had before, but somehow different, more vibrant, more alive. Or perhaps it was his perception that had changed. Soul stood beside the heart, looking older, not dramatically but noticeably. Perhaps a year had passed, maybe more. Isla emerged from her own cocoon, her eyes immediately seeking Dale's, then Soul's. "Did it work?" she asked, her voice hoarse from disuse. Soul nodded, a smile spreading across his face. "They're gone. They searched for months, but eventually declared us lost. Presumed dead." He reached out to touch the heart one last time. "The forest kept us safe, just as it promised." Dale looked around the chamber. The Syndicate operatives were gone, as Soul had said they would be. "How long were we?" Inside, almost 18 months, Sol replied. The forest sped up our perception of time while we were connected, so it didn't feel as long to us. 18 months. The galaxy would have changed in that time. New governments, new conflicts, new opportunities. The Syndicate might still exist, but their priorities would have shifted. And if they truly believed their quarry lost. What now? Isla asked, the question that had haunted them before they entered their living sanctuary. Dale looked at his son, then at Isla, the family he'd found, lost, and found again through the strangest of circumstances. Now we build something, he said. Not just run, not just survive. We build a life. Sol's expression brightened, the glow beneath his skin pulsing with what Dale now recognized as happiness. The forest says it can help us leave safely. It can grow us a vessel, something small but fast, something that can take us beyond Syndicate space. A ship? Dale asked incredulously. It can grow a spaceship? Not exactly, Sol clarified, but something that can survive in space long enough to reach the next system. Something alive. Isla laughed, a sound of wonder rather than disbelief. A living ship. Of course. Why not? After everything else we've seen. Dale found himself smiling as well, infected by their wonder, their hope. The future was uncertain, full of challenges they couldn't yet imagine. The Syndicate might one day pick up their trail again. Sol's unique abilities would always make him a person of interest to those who valued power over humanity. But for now, they were together. They had survived, and they had chosen to face whatever came next, not as isolated individuals, but as a family. As they prepared to leave the heart chamber, to begin the process of returning to the wider galaxy, Dale felt Sol's small hand slip into his. The boy looked up at him, those familiar eyes, his eyes, filled with a wisdom beyond his years. You're not running anymore, Sol observed quietly. Dale squeezed his son's hand gently. No, he agreed. Not anymore. Together, the three of them walked toward the tunnel that would lead them back to the surface of Vesker, 5 back to the stars. The living forest pulsed around them, a silent guardian that had given them not just shelter, but time. Time to heal, time to connect, time to become what they were always meant to be. Behind them, the heart of the forest continued its ancient rhythm, bearing witness to their departure as it had to their arrival. Another story in its centuries-long existence. Another family sheltered within its living embrace. And ahead of them stretched a future, uncertain and challenging, but faced together. Not running from what they feared, but moving toward what they hoped. Not an ending, but a beginning.